genitas, meam medet rudit simplicitas.
Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Elam.
And this is
Infobars.
And Elam, guess what we got after last time's episode?
What?
We got fan mail.
Fan mail?
Well, more like a fan email or text. And the person, big shout out to Grace in Baltimore, asked us if we would do a special episode about the topic of her choosing.
And what's that choice?
Well, pretty much anything but what we were doing before, which was talking about no topic as our topic. But anyways, her suggestion was that we talk about a popular singer whom you may know of.
Mick Jagger.
No. But yes, that's a popular singer, I believe. But no, this one's name is Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift's interesting, but you know who is more interesting?
Mick
Mick Jagger. Let me tell you about the Rolling Stones. You ever listen to the Rolling Stones? You were kicking when the Rolling Stones were kicking, right?
I think I was. In fact, and that's funny you should mention that, because when I lived in Aspen for a summer, I remember that I wanted to go to a bar, but the age there was 21. And I wanted to go into this bar, and it was very popular, lots and lots of people in it. And I didn't think I would look old enough, which is probably true, because I was 18 and I looked like I was 15. So a friend of mine, his name was Mark, had a Rolling Stones jacket. It was really cool. It was denim, and it had that big tongue thing.
The lips?
Yeah, the lips with the tongue in it,
yeah,
on the back. And he loaned me his Rolling Stones jacket, and so I went into this bar. And I go upstairs to the second floor where everybody was dancing. The place was humming. And I went up to the bar, and I asked the bartender for a beer. And he looked at me, and he says, "Well, do you have a license or an ID?" Now, my friend had loaned me his New York State driver's license. At least I think it was New York State. And at that time, the driver's license he had did not have a picture on it. So I had carefully memorized all the details on this license. And so he asked me my name. Told him my name. He said, "What's your birth date?" I gave him my birth date. And then he goes, "What's your sign?" And I was like, "My sign?" Yeah, he goes, Pisces or Taurus. What's your sign? And I was like, "I don't do those things." And he's like, "Get out of here." So that's my memory. My memory of the Rolling Stones was being thrown out of that bar.
Well, I also have a fun fact about the Rolling Stones for you. Want to hear it?
Sure.
Well, did you know that during the recording for their album Beggar's Bouquet, which was their sort of started their imperial period of like album after album of classic material, right? The album Beggar's Bouquet, they were recording the hit song Sympathy for the Devil. You know this song?
No.
It's that song where it's like from the perspective of the devil, describing the various things he's done and all the terrible events that have happened because of him. And it has this great rock instrumental. But one thing you might note listening to the song is this backing recording where it goes, woo, 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 woo. Now there's actually
an owl?
No. It's like someone in the background as they're playing going, woo, 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 woo.
What in the world is that for?
What's interesting is, it's because it's like, as the song's going, it's part of the rhythmic.
Of course, that might be something down in hell behind the devil, right? Had this random guy going woohoo.
Well, that's part of the story, is that when they were recording the song, so they had written it beforehand, and they were trying to record the song. They actually couldn't get a good recording of it because they couldn't get the texture of that backing vocal right.
The woohoo?
Yeah, they couldn't get it quite
They were actually worried about the woohoo?
Oh, immensely worried. Because every time it came off very flat, it was like, woo, 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 woo. And, it just didn't add to the sort of excitement and energy and depravity of the piece. So they're like,
woohoo.
Well, how do we resolve this? And they kept getting new people in the studio. You'd be surprised. There's a whole, revolving door.
Famous people coming in to record the woohoos?
To record the woo-woo. I mean, you name it. If they're I think Bob Dylan was there to record the woo-woo. Donovan was there to record the woo-woo.
Is this just a made-up story?
Well, let me continue before you doubt me.
Okay.
Donovan was in there to do a woo-woo. I believe Paul Simon was there to do a woo-woo.
What about Neil Young?
Neil Young was also there.
See, I actually knew who might actually do a woohoo in the background.
They actually had talks with the entirety of Crosby, Stills, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Too soon,
rest
man.
in peace, David
Yeah,
Crosby,
no doubt,
course.
too soon.
But they were in talks with all four of them to help provide the woo-woo, they actually went to the studio with the Rolling Stones.
How much money did they set aside as a budget for these woohoos?
Oh, they went massively over budget. The only reason the Rolling Stones are still around is because of how much of a success the single was. They knew that would be a hit.
Because of the woohoos.
Well, without the woo-woo, it wouldn't be a hit. So they needed the perfect texture for that woo-woo. But they kept asking these, immense talents, and they couldn't get it down. And here's what's shocking is the extents they went to actually get the woo-woo. So they've actually they even burned a few bridges trying to get talent to do these woo-woos.
You mean like they destroyed the relationships they had with these famous other singers?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they turned them down after they did the woo-woos?
Yeah, because none of them had quite the right tone they were looking for. They would do woo-woos. They would do stuff that had, like, a little bit of punch to
now
them.
that is kind of interesting, because, I used to be in an opera orchestra, and I know that, the words may not be the big thing. The big thing might be just the ability to produce that particular sound you're looking for.
Yeah, and each time the members of the Rolling Stones would run to the booth, and sometimes even in the booth, during the recording, it would sound like, oh, they got the texture perfect. But as soon as you hear it, it was like the uncanny valley. It was just a little bit off to the point where it became unsettling.
How come like Mick Jagger and the other Stones didn't just go in and try to record the woohoos?
They tried multiple times. In fact, one of them, I forget his name, but it was the keyboardist, actually tried so hard to do the woo-woos at varying levels of volume that his voice actually was permanently damaged. If you look up recordings of the keyboardist,
it's not a surprise, because frankly I thought all their voices were kind of damaged.
If you listen to recordings of the keyboardist, it's an immensely raspy voice. That's because of the sheer amount of damage he did to his vocal cords.
Well, I understand if you strain, if you're trying to make a certain sounding, you're using your neck muscles, you can really damage your vocals. Vocal cords and your whatever, yeah.
Well, he was also doing it for like 7 hours straight, though. That's
woohoo.
Yeah, the woo-woo.
No, recording sessions are grueling, I'll say that. They are very grueling, and they can be miserable.
So they've blazed through about all the budget they had for this album. And this is the first time they're recording, so they're pretty screwed at this point. Pardon my French. So they're like, well, what are we going to do? So at this point, they contacted a medium.
A medium? You mean somebody in between?
Yeah, well, what they realized was...
Or do you mean like one of those spiritualists?
Well, if I recall correctly, I can't remember who wrote the song. I think it's Jagger. Jagger had written this song, and he recalled that as he was writing the song, it was right after he read the novel Master and Margarita, he recalled waking up, and it was as though he was on opium, a la Kubla Khan by Coleridge. He woke up... And he had all the lyrics in his mind.
Wow.
Immediately upon waking up. He had the
Creepy.
entire song structure.
Very creepy.
And he immediately jotted it all down. And it felt as though, he said this later, it felt as though he was possessed. So he said, well, what if this did come from the devil? If it did, how do we go about this? So, the Rolling Stones, famously British, right?
Yes, I think they are British. That is correct.
Very British lads. So,
like David Bowie. Isn't he British too?
Indeed.
Okay.
David Bowie, fun fact, actually
Beatles.
one of the people asked to do backing vocals.
For the woohoos?
For the woo-woos.
Did he do the woohoos?
He did. He didn't do a good enough job, though, is the issue. Even him.
Wow, even David Bowie.
Even Bowie. So, they contacted Medium, the Rolling Stones. They contacted this Medium and said, with a Ouija board, do you think you could contact Aleister Crowley? You know anything about Aleister Crowley?
Aleister Crowley. Wow, he was an old spiritualist, wasn't he?
The legendary occultist.
Yeah,
dead.
quite occultist. And didn't he even found the whole satanic worship and stuff like that? I mean, he was a well-known Satanist, if I'm not mistaken.
A true legend of his craft.
So, if that's a craft, I guess.
He's
not enjoying it now, but go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. So they contacted Aleister Crowley via this medium, and Aleister Crowley said, well, what do you need from me? This is via Ouija board.
I'm surprised he didn't ask for some cool water to cut down on the flames. But go ahead.
Well, the Rolling Stones responded, Sir Crowley, we have a little bit of a dilemma. We're trying to record this rockin' jammin' number named Sympathy for the Devil, but we found that all our backing vocals lack the requisite sympathy for the devil we need.
Requisite,
yes.
requisite, yeah.
So, Mr. Crowley, or Sir Crowley, apologies. That's what they said verbatim. They actually did that little...
Sir, yeah, oh, no kidding.
Yeah, yes. They said, Sir Aleister Crowley, would you, what method would gain us the woo-woos necessary? And Sir Crowley, the Ouija board actually shook as though the ground was quaking beneath it, even though everything else was as still as a corpse. And then suddenly there's a moaning in the distance, something distinctive from wind, but not quite distinctive enough. And in that silence that wasn't silence, the board shook and shivered its way to the words, "There is one way. You have to, in order to get the vocals you need, you have to perform a certain ritual."
A ritual?
Indeed.
Wow, that sounds really creepy. I had no idea the Rolling Stones. I mean, if you had told me Alice Cooper or what's that other Marilyn Manson guy, I would have believed this. But Rolling Stones, this is really shocking.
Well, let me tell you, this is the truly shocking part. So the ritual needed, they were told to, and they ended up doing this. They actually ended up, to clarify, Infoboards does not support satanic worship or anything along those lines.
No, actually, we're really against it, I would say, at least on this side of the...
So, don't do this at home, kids.
Yeah.
They would actually, they kidnapped a 22-year-old man.
You're saying that the Rolling Stones kidnapped a 22-year-old man?
Yeah, it was one of their fans at a concert. They were so deep into the hole, they had to do something, you know.
And how much do you think Infoboards is going to have to pay for this lawsuit? But go ahead.
Well, this is true, though.
Oh, okay. So they kidnapped this 22-year-old man.
Yeah, and they tied him up. And put them in the middle of a gigantic blood-red pentagram. They actually used the blood of pigs in order to make the pentagram, right?
Nasty.
Pentagram, by the way, being the 5-star...
Yeah, it's got that 5-star pointy thing, and sometimes they put the candles... Pointing down, they had the candles on every point.
Yeah, you have a candle on every point,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, it's kind of a standard for the horror films.
Yeah. So they actually put this bound-up 22-year-old Rolling Stones fan...
At least he was a fan. He probably wasn't that upset, because he got to be with the Stones, right? Go on. I'm sorry.
Well, he was a fan initially. They actually, when they kidnapped him, he was actually very willing to come along, because they said to him...
Is that a kidnapping if you're willing to go along?
Well, it was a kidnapping at the point where he wanted to leave, but...
Okay, go on.
Continue.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, they said, would you be interested in having your vocals feature in a Rolling Stones song?
Wow, that's quite an honor to be asked that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, I can't get into the rest of it in much detail because it'd be too graphic to air. However, all I will say is that what they ended up doing is they used the screams of the now missing 22-year-old, and they just edited it into the shape of a woohoo. So the next time, listener, you hear Sympathy for the Devil, know that those are the last screaming gasps of a now corpse. Or skeleton, I guess, because it's been decades.
But they don't know that he's a skeleton or corpse. He just hasn't shown up again.
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. That's a good point.
Yeah,
maybe after he did all those woohoos,
just retired. He couldn't ever do better in life. So.
That's true. You know what, listener? Actually, I've changed my mind. I think this had a real happy ending.
Well, he might have ended up in some beach in Mexico sipping margaritas, thinking, "Wow, I made those woohoos."
Yeah. Do you think he got royalties? Well, here's something else that's interesting.
I doubt he got royalties. Well, you never know, though. Even the smallest sounds sometimes get royalties.
Well, here's something that's interesting for you, though. So this satanic ritual happens with the help of Aleister Crowley, with the intent of producing this song. But you know what's interesting is that's sort of the, it was only a bit later that it became the real end of the 60s, though, and the peace and love movement.
Oh,
that's when Charles Manson comes around.
No, boy, let's not even go there. Hey, quick question, though.
Well,
go on, sorry.
It's just interesting to note that that's really when the 60s became the 70s, became the 80s. This moment of rock and roll violence downturning everything into a sort of miraculous depravity. It's quite fascinating.
Would you say then that in some way Sir Aleister Crowley through the Stones then was a composer of sorts?
Something like that.
And he's dead now, so he's deep